Okay, on the Republican side of the race, I'm hearing, and I said this on TV last night, I'm hearing more and more from people who I know who are on the, I don't want to say on the inside of the Republican Party, but because, I don't know anybody who's like, a senior official in the RNC or something like that, or at least not personally. But people who are Republican activists in Washington, D.C. and regularly rub shoulders with such folks. That what the party really wants is Paul Ryan running for president. And that they are convinced that Ted Cruz, with all of his religious baggage and the weird advisors that he's got, who want, the guy in particular who wants to execute women who've had abortions, Ted Cruz not only is not repudiating him, but there's a religious talk show, for lack of a better phrase, and run by a mega church preacher who's saying the same thing. And he, and kill gay people. And in both cases, these people have introduced Ted Cruz at events. I mean, Ted Cruz is. You think Donald Trump is weird or an extremist? Ted Cruz is as extreme as the Republican Party can get. And believe it or not, John Kasich is right there with it. I mean, what John Kasich has actually done to women in the state of Ohio should be enough to disqualify him from being president, in my opinion. Or even running as a Republican, because they need women's votes too. So you've got, Donald Trump, his negatives, I don't even have to go through the catalog. They're so well publicized because that's all we ever see particularly on the Trump network, but also on CNN. And I frankly, I have no idea what Fox is doing these days. I've just, gave up on them altogether. And Paul Ryan, of course, is an extremist too. He is, quote, pro-life. He is, and although he doesn't have advisors who say women should be executed, so maybe he's a moderate pro-lifer. I don't know. He's, and if you look at his budgets that he comes up with every year as chairman of the House Budget Committee, they are budgets that just devastate working people and poor people, and continue shoveling more and more money out of the hands of working people and the working poor, basically the bottom 50% of the economy, people making less than $40,000 a year. They're shoveling money out of those people's pockets and into the coffers of the very, very rich. This is who Paul Ryan serves. And now Charles Koch has come out and said, yeah, he's our guy. He's the guy that we'd like to see. And they're sitting on $800 million, maybe $900 million of money, their own money and money of other fellow billionaires who are part of the so-called Koch network. And so when somebody who has a political operation that is more sophisticated than the Republican Party, and the Koch brothers have built this with Americans for Prosperity and about a bunch of other front groups and grassroots, AstroTurf and grassroots groups all across the country at the state level, ALEC, everything else. I mean, they have built this incredible infrastructure. They've got a database that is better than the Republican Party of voters and potential voters. And they're willing to drop $800 million or $900 million into almost $1 billion into the race in support of somebody that they can get behind. When somebody like that says to the Republican Party, hey, we like Paul Ryan, you think the Republican Party is going to tell him to, take a hike? So what happens to the Republican Party if Paul Ryan is the nominee? Now, he's already run as vice president, so there's lots of precedent for this. Richard Nixon was vice president to Eisenhower for 8 years, ran for president based on that in 1960, lost, ran for president again based on that in 72? And won. Or 68, actually, he won, didn't he? He beat Hubert Humphrey. Yeah, it was 68, and then he ran for re-election in 72. In the middle of the Watergate scandal, and it didn't really break until after the election because the media didn't want to influence the election, right? Which is terrible. It's media malpractice, but that's a whole nother thing. And that was a long time ago. But Mike Allen, writing over at Politico, he says, on the eve of the Wisconsin primaries, top Republicans are becoming increasingly vocal about their long-held belief that Speaker Ryan will wind up as the nominee, perhaps on the fourth ballot at a chaotic Cleveland convention. I've also heard that many of the same people are pushing for Marco Rubio to be the vice presidential nominee. Two young guys, one of them from the Midwest, the northern Midwest, one of them from the South, one of them a white-bread rock rib conservative, whatever that means these days. Koch brothers shill, and the other, in the case of Marco Rubio, a Shelley Adelson, shill. He has kissed the feet of Sheldon Adelson on multiple occasions. And so these are acceptable candidates. Maybe not to the Republican Party, but to this parallel. So this is the thing I find fascinating. The article that I was trashing earlier from Daily Beast, for picking on Bernie for how dare he basically launch a primary challenge against Hillary Clinton. I mean, that was the essence of it. And trying to pretend that is somehow the same thing as Ralph Nader running a third-party challenge against both Al Gore and George W. Bush in 2000. And there's just no comparison. It's a stupid comparison. But on the Republican side, you actually have a separate machine that has been built outside of the party that is owned by a group of billionaires outside of the party who have used their force and power to get a large number of people elected in state houses and at the federal level. It's easy to bash Debbie Wasserman Schultz for losing over 900 seats in state houses and state senates around the country during the time that she's been head of the DNC. But the reality is that she didn't so much lose them. I would say the failure of 50-state strategy lost many of them. But she didn't so much lose them as the Koch brothers picked them up. They're funding races all the way down to the level of city council and school board. So if the Republicans do this, if they just throw aside their base, what's going to happen to the Republican Party? And I would love to hear from any Republicans who are listening. Now, right now, every single line on, that we've got, actually, we've got one line open. No, we don't have one line open. Danielle's talking to somebody. So, keep trying, Republicans, because I'd like to hear what you think about this. Also today, the New York Times finally decided to come out, and maybe they've done this before and I just haven't noticed it, but finally decided to come out and actually call these so-called anti-voter fraud, voter ID laws what they are. They're voter suppression. And in fact, this is the editorial board. This is not, Paul Krugman's column. This is the editorial board, the official position of the New York Times, the newspaper of record for the United States of America. It's become an accepted truth of modern politics that Republican electoral prospects go up as the number of voters go down. Conservatives have known this for a long time, which helps explain their intensifying efforts to make it harder to vote or to eliminate large numbers of people from political representation entirely. And, it's like, yeah, let's tell the truth here. So what happens if in the Republican convention they say, well, yeah, Donald Trump's got more votes and more delegates than anybody else, but he hasn't hit that magic number. And Ted Cruz is far enough behind we can ignore him. And John Kasich only won one state, and that was his home state of Ohio. He's kind of a joke. So we're just going to take this thing over. I think this is going to be fascinating.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.